Hi. All right, so we've looked at some of the themes in classical East Asian thought with Taoism and Confucianism. And we've looked at some of the themes in classical South Asian thought with the Upanishads and the Brahmanical tradition. And now we're going to turn our attention towards the last branch of this course of study of ours, classical Buddhist thought. Now, I got to tell you, classical Buddhist thought, this is a treacherous road to travel. On one hand, it is exceptionally diverse. Buddhism in Sri Lanka, Buddhism in Tibet, Buddhism in Thailand, Buddhism in Japan, these are all very different from one another. So much so that if you were to see them separately and you didn't necessarily know that it was Buddhism, there are times when it would be hard to tell that it was the same thing. Buddhism succeeds because it's able to go into the culture that it's in and address the central human problems that are there, and that means that there's an awful lot of variety to it. But there's something even more than that. In addition to being exceptionally diverse culturally, Buddhism is one of the most counterintuitive ways of looking at the world that you are ever going to come across. Just to give you an example, we're going to talk about the fact that there is no such thing as a thing. And you hear that and you say, oh my God, what does that even mean? This is one of the most difficult ideas to understand within Buddhism, and it's difficult to understand in general. What I want to do is I want to begin approaching this by looking at, we're going to look at the variations within Buddhism. We're going to look at some of the general terms within Buddhism. But even before that, I want to give you a few propaedeutics for thinking about Buddhism. Now, what's a propaedeutic? This is a term you might not have heard before. Propaedeutic, it's not a medical device, it's not a medical procedure. A propaedeutic is a preparation, and specifically it's a preparation for learning. For instance, algebra and geometry and trigonometry, these are propaedeutics for calculus. Studying biology and organic chemistry, these are propaedeutics for the practice of medicine. Okay, so it is that I would like to give you a propaedeutic for thinking about Buddhism. And in particular, what I would like to do is I would like to get across what Buddhism fundamentally is about. Now, you've probably heard of Buddhism before, and you've probably heard of Buddhism as a religion within Asia. This is true. Buddhism is a religion. I mean, certainly it's the central religion of Tibet. It's an important religion in Thailand, in Sri Lanka, in China, all of these things. But if by religion we mean a way in which a person is bound to the rightness of a cosmology, so that they feel a sense of being tied to a vision of the whole of the universe and sort of find their identity through that, if that's what a religion is, then while Buddhism is a religion, I would say it is only superficially a religion. And what I mean by that is not to say that it's a superficial religion. I just mean that at the core of its religiousness, there's something else. And you know what that is? A philosophy. There is a way in which Buddhism, as a religion, is a way of thinking about thinking. It's a way of thinking specifically about how our mind approaches its activity, its desires, its objects, and probably most importantly, itself, and the ways in which it generates not exactly illusions, but delusions through its own activity. Buddhism is a way, in other words, of trying to understand how it is that the activity of the mind gets in the way of the mind understanding itself and being at peace. So in this respect, there is a religion to Buddhism. There are all sorts of practices, there are all sorts of beliefs, there is a deep sense of faith in many forms of Buddhism. But even beyond these, there is a philosophy that underlies that. And there's one more thing I got to tell you about this too. In addition to there being a philosophy, at the core of the philosophy is a question. Why pursue this philosophy? Do we reflect upon the nature of understanding, of grasping, of seeing, of perceiving? Do we rest upon our understanding of what things are such as they are simply for their own understanding? No, that's not the case. And as abstract as so many things within Buddhism are going to get, this is not about understanding merely for its own sake. At the core of Buddhist philosophy is the idea that Buddhism fundamentally is a form of therapy. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that Buddhism is trying to help us deal with a common and inextricable problem that comes from having a human body and a human mind and leading a human life. Indeed, any sentient being at all. And it's this: all of us, insofar as we perceive, insofar as we think, insofar as we live, are suffering from a malady, an ailment that causes us to suffer perpetually and reiterate this process of suffering just in terms of being what we are. We have an addiction, and this addiction is to existence. What I would like to say is that while Buddhism is a religion, even more than a religion, it is a philosophy. And at the core of this philosophy, underneath this philosophy, within this philosophy, grounding this philosophy, is a therapeutic method. A therapy for dealing with a fundamental problem. The problem that we are addicted to existence. Now, you might ask yourself, addicted to existence, that's a peculiar thing to say. How can I be addicted to something that I can't avoid? Well, it comes down to this. What we are going to see is that there is no such thing as existence. Existence is not a given condition. Rather, for Buddhism, existence is a delusion that comes to us because we have generated it, we have articulated it in terms of our predispositions, in terms of a set of conditions that have been made so that our mind can see it in this particular way. The problem is that existence can never be all that it's cracked up to be. Existence can never sustain itself. Existence can never be permanent. This is a central idea in Buddhism. Existence can never be permanent. And because existence can never be permanent, and because it is so hard for us to persist in our being with the realization of that, to live that way, to recognize that existence can never be permanent, the things that we love, the things that we want, the things that we hold, the things that we understand, our very understanding of ourselves, that none of this can be permanent, that all of this is instantaneous, that all of this is merely thus. Trying to understand this is what Buddhism is fundamentally about. Trying to acclimate us to this situation. When we can acclimate ourselves to that there is no such thing as existence. There is merely the world such as it is, and that we are such as we are in relation to everything else such as we are. It's from that the philosophy develops, from that the religion develops, and from that the fruits of Buddhism, the idea of overcoming suffering, the idea of permeating compassion, the idea of being able to be full and rich and present in the world as it really is, comes about. So, this is what we got. As much as diverse as religion, as much as Buddhism is so diverse and so rich and so deep in all these ways, you got this fundamental problem, an addiction to existence, to something that isn't real. And Buddhism, if nothing else, is simply a way of trying to deal with that. I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this and as you read this stuff and as I go through these conversations, right? It's a means of trying to deal with the problem of addiction to something that cannot be, to existence, and understanding what that is and how to actually be in the presence of that.